basketball is that? Too slow.
Too slow.
It's like this.
Too slow.
Look at the basketball. Oh!
Give me.
Way too slow.
You gotta pay attention.
When do you want to be picked up?
I want we all go to McDonald's and we all get the food and we all leave, go to wherever Granddad wants to go.
When do you want to be picked up?
We all go to McDonald's and we all get the food and we all leave, go to wherever Granddad wants to go.
Whose basketball is that? Too slow.
Too slow.
It's like this.
Too slow.
Look at the basketball. Oh!
Gimme.
Way too slow.
Gotta pay attention.
When do you want to be picked up?
We all go to McDonald's and we all get the food and we all leave, go to wherever Granddad wants to go.
I've always had this weird fear that nobody would show up to my dad's funeral. You know how you have these like just weird thoughts that are in your mind, and so I'm so thankful for each of you guys being here. I'm gonna try to moderate this. We'll see how this is gonna go. This is either going to be about 20 minutes or about 2 hours, and I'm not really sure which one. So if you need to leave, the doors will not be locked. We're not really sure. My dad didn't go to church. He didn't attend a Sunday service on a consistent basis, and so we just wanted to honor him today by telling his story. And I want to just acknowledge, first of all, that he would not have liked any of this. He would have hated all of this. He would have been especially mad that we're doing this at 2:20, right in the middle of the Falcons and Cowboys game. But he also would not have understood that we all have, TiVo now, which you might not even get that reference. But today, this is not for him. This is for us. This is for me and my family, my sister, my sisters, my brothers. I think this is for y'all too. His brother, Uncle Homer, and their family. And so today we want to tell his story. And we want to honor him by doing that. Today, we're going to cry. And I say we, if you don't cry, you didn't know Dad. Because just watching that. And I'm sorry for starting late, but I wanted to see that one more time. And again, this may be 20 minutes or 2 hours. I don't know how this will go. But I know I'm going to cry, but we're also going to laugh. You're going to hear the story of my dad, and you're going to hear all the amazing things that he did, some of the things that he loved. My brother Lance, and I may be stealing your thunder wherever you are. I may be stealing your thunder, but he said this so perfectly. He said, I'm going to call him my dad. He said, Dad loved many things and hated very few. And so we're going to talk about some of the things that he loved, and I can just tell you that all the things that he loved had a common theme, and that theme was bringing joy to people. So as you hear the stories today, we're not going to tell you the bad stuff, not too much of it anyway, and if they start telling too much of the bad stuff, Stephen's going to turn the microphone off. Because I know so many of you think this, but I had an amazing father. I think my sister yesterday or earlier today or sometime she said, well, nobody's childhood was perfect. And I was like, yeah, mine was. So you can absolutely heckle. Dad would heckle this. Dad would tell me to be quiet and move on and sit down. He wouldn't tell me that. He would tell y'all that. Oh, well, yeah, no. I don't doubt that. My dad was 81 years old when he passed, and so there are only a handful of people here who knew him in his childhood, and I couldn't convince them to speak today. So I want to just tell you a little bit about his childhood. Now, in full disclosure, every story that every person today is going to tell, none of us are saying that these stories are true. What we're saying is this is the way that we remember the stories. So if you knew Dad and I messed this up, just nod, keep smiling. Later on, if you were around at the time whenever the story's told and you're like, that is not the way that it happened, I promise you we're making it better than it actually was. So just let us have that. My dad was born, he was born August 15th, 1943 in Cleveland, Georgia. And forever, until the last 5 or 6 years, he thought that he was born Jerry Evan Black. He didn't find out until the last several years that he actually did not have the middle name of Evan. It was just Jerry Black. And I don't even know the story behind that, but it's an amazing story. He was born in Cleveland, Georgia, and man, he loved Cleveland, Georgia. It was something about the historical roots, the mountains, the outdoors. I mean, Dad loved Cleveland. It was pretty early on that they moved to Hapeville, and he graduated from Hapeville High School. And Dad loved Hapeville as well. Even at the end of his life, he wanted to move back to Cleveland or to Hapeville. He had no idea that these places were not the same, that it's been 50 years. Hapeville is not, Dad, you don't want to live in Hapeville. He would say, I want to live in Hapeville and I can just walk everywhere and I'm like, Dad, I don't think it's the same as it was then. And Dad didn't have the perfect childhood like I did. But Dad was always intelligent, athletic, fun. He was always great with kids. And he graduated from Hapeville High School. He went to Georgia State University and graduated from there and played tennis and ran cross country. And he would never talk about those things. So I don't have a lot of stories about that. Uncle Homer gave me Dad's brother, he gave me a newspaper article, and we were trying to read it and figure it out. And I don't know if the article said that him and these other guys got 5th place in some meet, or there was 5 of them running in a meet. I don't know. It was really weird. But he was pretty good at cross country, but he was great at tennis. I mean, he was absolutely phenomenal. He got drafted into the Army, went into the Army, and I didn't know this until last week. The course of his time in the Army, one of his stops was in New Jersey where his brother, Uncle Homer, was, and they got to spend time together there before he was shipped off to Germany. And in Germany, I guess they found out that my dad was a good tennis player and played tennis in college. So apparently from then on, he just didn't really do a whole lot of work and went with some Army tennis team all across Europe just playing tennis matches and accumulating military service time and paychecks. That's mind-blowing to me, but in the Army, he had a top secret communications post, so he wasn't going to talk about it anyway, but he couldn't talk about it even if he wanted to. But I know that Dad had way more fun just going and playing tennis across the country rather than whatever work they had him doing. There's not a whole lot that I knew growing up about my dad's childhood. All I can say is whatever happened in his childhood, for him, against him, to him, it made him the greatest man I've ever met in my life. And I've met some great men. There's some great men here today. Dad absolutely loved, he adored his mom and dad. His mom, call her Grandma Black. And again, this is definitely tracking more towards 2 hours than 20 minutes. but this is in part for me, so suck it up. Um, I'm only half joking. My grandma Black, the way I remember it was she lived with us. And she did not live with us, but that's the way that I remember. I remember that Grandma Black invented grilled cheese sandwiches. Clearly, she was not the inventor of grilled cheese sandwiches. I remember her sitting in this chair in our living room and just being this ray of sunshine and joy. And other than that, I don't have many memories of Grandma Black, but my dad adored her. At the end of her days, she was talking a lot about genealogy and who was related to who and all of these. And my dad took these big white poster boards, and I bet he had 50 of them. And she would talk, and he would write down, this is our great grandmother, and it took him on a path, really for the rest of his life, of finding and researching our genealogy. And he published a book that's I believe it's in the White County Library, and it is absolutely amazing, taking our family history back to the 1300s. And I always saw that as a way that he honored his mom, a way that he showed love to his mom. He didn't talk much about his dad, to me anyways, but I know that he loved his dad, and the times that he did speak of his dad, it was very respectful and honoring. We lived in Austin for about 10 years, and this is one of the stories that doesn't track. I don't know, this doesn't make sense. I remember I was driving him back to the airport, but I don't know when. Dad would have never flown to Austin, so I don't even know. We were in a car somewhere in some part of the world, and Dad, he looked over at me, and he was in the front passenger seat, and I was driving. It was just me and him, and he said, Evan, I never really told you I loved you very much or gave you many hugs. And I'm thinking, Dad, why are you telling me this? Like, I'm a man. I don't need all that stuff. And it was like, this was not Dad. Dad didn't talk like this. And he said, I didn't do that because my dad didn't do that. But I always knew that my dad loved me. And I hope that you always know that I love you. And that was my dad. He was fun. And he loved deeply. And he loved passionately. One of my dad's greatest loves, in many ways, maybe his greatest love, was my mom. And that gasp is for those who maybe know a little more of the story. And so I'm going to try to sit down, and I would love for my mom to come up and just share a little bit about her time with my dad. Hey, look, the door is there. It's not locked.
Thank you. Okay. Well, Evan had been in church work now for almost 20 years. And he never finishes a sermon, hardly ever, without saying that he wasn't raised in church. Well, I got to straighten that up right now before I even talk about Jerry, because we used to go to church. We went to First Methodist Church in Woodstock, and I was always late. And Jerry, one day, and he went with me, and one day he said, if we're late again, I'm not ever going again. And I called his bluff, and he didn't go. So, Evan, that's a straight story. You did go. Jerry and I got married. Well, let me tell you how we met. We met on like a Friday night. We were introduced. Monday, he calls me and wants me to go to dinner with him. So I went to dinner with him and didn't leave for 15 years. It's a true story. He was the coolest dude. His hair was marvelous. He had this, Homer, you know, you had that hair too. It was all that beautiful hair. He wore like the coolest clothes. He wore those, what are those male heels? Platforms. He wore platforms. Oh, he was so cool. And that lasted probably 10 years of our marriage. He was cool. No, he was always cool. But we had a lot of joy. We had a lot of love. He was as good to my kids as he could be. He was another father to my kids. We had 4 when I married him. And then we had Evan. And he really never made a lot of difference in them, except he got to spend more time with Evan. But he was a wonderful father. I'm sorry about that picture. I do need to apologize. But I did have something I wanted to share. I imagine death as that gentle moment when Jesus scoops you up from the couch, half asleep, after dozing off during a family gathering. You feel the warmth of familiar arms carrying you to bed, still hearing the soft echoes of laughter and love drifting in from the other room. There's no fear, no resistance, just a quiet surrender, like letting yourself be taken to bed when you were a child, trusting that you're safe and cared for. As you drift, you still hear the soft, comforting sounds of life continuing in the other room. The laughter, the music, the loving sounds of the people who made your world so rich. There's a sense of completion, a feeling that everything has come full circle and you can finally let go, knowing you've left pieces of yourself in the lives you loved. In that moment, as if you're wrapped in a warmth that transcends this world, a love that reaches beyond what you can touch or see, you feel the presence of those who have passed before you, waiting to welcome you with open arms, like returning to a place you've always known but haven't seen in a while, like going back to White County. There's no loneliness, no darkness, just the gentle transition from one form of life to another, as natural as moving from one room to the next. Death, in this way, is not an ending but a homecoming. It's the quiet comfort of knowing you're being carried, not into the unknown, but back to a place of peace, where every struggle, every joy, and every memory lives on. It's the embrace of something larger than ourselves, something that says, you've done enough, you are enough, and now it's time to rest. And so you go, not with fear, but with gratitude and a serene heart, knowing that love is eternal, and so that even in leaving, you are part of the laughter and light that fills the lives of those who carry on. And I have a little scripture, because my son's a preacher, I have to do this. Okay. This is from Philippians, and it's Paul's letter to the Philippians. I know that. Okay, finally, brothers and sisters, whatever is true, whatever is noble, whatever is right, whatever is pure, whatever is lovely, whatever is admirable, if anything is excellent or praiseworthy, think about such things. Whatever you have learned or received or heard from me or seen in me, put it into practice, and the God of peace will be with you. Be like Jerry.
My dad, he loved Mom, and that was the love of his life in that way. But I think as we hear more about Dad, you'll see that he was a lot of things. He was an accountant. He was an athlete. He was a brother. He was an uncle. He was a granddad. But the thing that he cherished the most was being a dad. He loved nothing more than being a dad. And that wasn't just for me. We'll talk about me a little later. But he was a dad to many. And so I want to ask my sister Kathy if she'll come, if she's ready. And she's going to speak for, we never called my brothers and sisters step brother and sister or step kids. Yeah. Even half. I didn't even realize y'all weren't my full brothers and sisters until I was in high school. Well, I mean, same parents, same dad. All the, no, I know. Come on up here. You need the microphone. No, you have to have the microphone. You have to have the microphone. We're recording it.
Okay, I'll do the microphone. Oh, I can speak up. Okay, so Jerry came along when I was about 11. And so I was very dad confused because I had so many at that point that I always kind of, in my head and everything, I called him Jerry Dad. So that's what I have on this. But Jerry Dad was a good dad. He walked into our lives after everything we knew had been taken away from us or burned to the ground. He was strong enough to take on 4 traumatized kids because he fell in love with my mother. During that time, Jerry Dad filled a space we didn't know needed filling. You know, we were young. Nobody knew anything about what we'd been through. Lance and Doug had the ultimate playmate. Tracy had a loving, caring father, and I had someone that stood between me and my traumatized worst impulses. And he was good at it. He was very stubborn. He could be kind, funny, playful, and at times stubborn and strict, which I needed. Up until Jerry Dad came along, the men in our lives had been truck drivers, mechanics, macho police officers. Jerry Dad was smart, accomplished, and athletic, totally out of our realm. He tried to teach Tracy and me a love of tennis, but finally accepted defeat after numerous trips to Hateville and a multitude of lost tennis balls on purpose. One of the greatest gifts he gave us was Evan. I know Mom actually birthed him, but Jerry Dad showed us a different way of parenting. He demonstrated his love for Evan fiercely and completely. For a man to raise a son as fine of a human being as Evan is truly special. Tracy, what can I say about my strong, kind-hearted, and devoted sister? When he came into our lives, Tracy was as traumatized as I was, but it was the 70s. People were just starting to study trauma. Jerry Dad instinctively knew what Tracy needed the most, and he provided in big ways. Later in his life, when he needed a loving place to live, Tracy and Brian took him in without hesitation and made his life happy, healthy, and whole. During his final years, Evan and Priscilla made their way back to Georgia. This was definitely a God thing. There is a plan for us all, and Evan needed those final years with his dad as much as his dad needed him. To end this, Jerry was a prankster, loving, devoted father, and a man who changed our lives in many good ways. We love you, and we will miss you. Thanks for what? I didn't even use a microphone.
And you didn't even use it. You just put it around you. So Kathy left off so many great stories. I don't know if I'm allowed to tell them, but I have the microphone, and she no longer has the microphone. So my dad, I feel like in y'all's childhood, I have the most Kathy and Tracy stories, with more Kathy stories than Tracy stories. Like, for example, Kathy was a little older, and so she was a little farther along in her rebellion. And so even back then, my dad didn't want anybody smoking. I don't know if dad or mom or just anybody. And I don't care. I'm telling it. I have the microphone, and this is not my church, but I help pay the rent here. So Kathy would think that she was sneaking away from Dad and go in the basement. We had this basement, and she would go down there and smoke cigarettes. And this is before me. I don't know. I'm just hearing the story. She would go down there and smoke cigarettes. Well, there was a vent right next to where she would smoke, and the vent led upstairs to one of the rooms. And so what Dad would do is he would go by the vent, he would smell the smoke, and he would get to hear all of her teenage stories and plans and all of this. And so the way I remember it is she would hide her cigarettes in this book. And I don't know what kind of book, but it wasn't actually a book. It just looked like a book. If you opened it up, it had a little cutout where the cigarettes went. Yeah, no. Lance is not getting pulled into this. This is all you, Kathy. You're the oldest. Own it. It's yours. Well, so Dad figured out about this book because she would talk about it and he would listen through the vents. And so the way that I remember it was he would go and he would steal the cigarettes out of the book because she couldn't say anything about it because then she was admitting to having cigarettes and hiding them in the book. My favorite, though, was the one you recently told about going to the beach. Can I tell that one? Nice. So they go to the beach, and her and Angie, cousin, was at the beach, and they were trying to, do what teenage girls do. They're looking for boys. And so dad comes around, and I guess the boys are near, and Dad figures out what's going on, and he yells out so everybody at the beach hears, "Hey, they're only 13 years old." She said the rest of that vacation was really quiet and awkward and not very fun, and that is Dad. My cousin Tim last week was telling me a story, and he mentioned Dad working at Whitewater, and I just do not ever remember Dad working at Whitewater. And so me and Tracy were talking. We were like, I know exactly what happened. Dad never worked at Whitewater. Dad had to figure out a way, and again, Tim, this may not be right, but I got the mic, so just let me go with it. Dad probably he had to figure out a way to take Tim and whoever to Whitewater. Maybe Uncle Homer or Aunt Cheryl wouldn't let him go or whatever, didn't want him to pay or whatever. So he made up this elaborate story about him working at Whitewater just so he could get them to go to Whitewater for free. I don't know if that's the way it went, but that sounds like Dad. Dad wasn't just a dad to me or to Kathy or Tracy or Doug. I know Doug would love to speak today, but he's not feeling well. Dad was also a father figure in many ways to the kids around us and my friends and our whole neighborhood. And so I want to ask Wayne and Brett to come up and just share some of their thoughts and their memories. Wayne grew up a few doors down from me and was like my big brother. He was my big brother in many ways. Doug, Lance, all the things that because y'all were older and y'all weren't there that y'all didn't get to do, like lower the basketball rim, put me on it, and then raise it to 10 feet so I couldn't get off. Say we're going to play two-hand touch in the street, but then push me down every chance you got so I would go sliding on the car. That scar is from you and your buddies. I'm going to let you say what you're going to say, and then I'm going to have a lot more after that.
Thank you. Evan is like a little brother to me. Not just really is a little brother to me. I was telling somebody earlier that, a lot of people you can pinpoint when you meet them. Oh, I met them when we started middle school, or they played on my basketball team. Every memory I have, Evan has been a part of my life. I can't tell you when I met him because I've literally known him my entire life. When I walked in, I saw these tennis rackets. So I have a handful of stories that I'm just going to tell. Evan, as Brett and I talked about, didn't prepare us at all for what he wanted us to say. So I'm just going to tell a few stories. I don't even know if Evan will remember this. I wasn't planning on saying this one, but I saw the tennis rackets here. And this just speaks to how Jerry was in our life. So he took us to this place called Bowling Park, and they had this tennis center there. And he's trying to teach us how to play tennis. He stands up and they have those little boxes. He's serving and hitting the ball back and forth. And Evan and I are trying to play tennis for about, a couple minutes. Then we decide that we're going to play home run derby with the tennis balls, and we literally are pitching the balls back and forth, trying to hit it over the fence. I know that that's not necessarily why Jerry brought us there that day, but nonetheless, he sat there, he looked at us, he knew that it was about having fun. And that's the one thing that I always remember about him is how no matter what we were doing, he wanted us to have a good time, he wanted us to have fun. He's very selfless. I used that term when I texted Evan when I first learned about his passing. Another story that I think kind of promotes that is we used to go to Falcon games a lot. And so he would get up in the morning. My mom and I were speaking about this morning. He would get up and take us to the Atlanta Falcons to Fulton County Stadium. First thing in the morning, 1 o'clock kickoff. We're there by 9 o'clock in the morning so that Evan and I could chase players around and try and get autographs and stuff. I don't even know that he had ticket for himself, but he made sure that we were going to the game. And then he would sit throughout the game and wait for us after the game. And we did not leave after the game. We then chased players around again for another couple hours after the game trying to get autographs. And I mean, it just goes to show how, in my mind, so many things about him were, he was focused on us. He was focused on us trying to have, the best time that we could have. He was, incredibly devoted to Evan and his family. It was not a situation, I never felt like he was ever somebody that was didn't care really about who he was talking to. It was more focused on his family and on us. And for that, I'm so grateful. A lot of memories of him. Another memory that I have of him is one day we were at the Falcons game and we walked in and they were handing out these cards and these trading cards. And Evan knows what I'm going to say. And so this was before Evan was a preacher, so forgive us, but we ran around to every single, when you walk through the gate, they were supposed to get a single pack. Well, we decided to run around every single gate and took every single pack we could find. We probably had 300 to 500 packs of those cards by the time we were done. So during the game, I'm watching the game, Evan's sitting there scratching off these I don't know, like winning prize things, and he wins the grand prize of the game. And the grand prize was a trip to Hawaii to go to the Pro Bowl. And Jerry didn't want him and Evan to go. He wanted me to go with them, just so that Evan would have a good time and so that we could have this experience. It was something, again, that, I'll never forget. And I think that, now granted, I was unable to go for a couple reasons. But it was something that he was willing to do. And I think, again, it just speaks to, in my mind, his selflessness. Evan and I grew up just a few doors apart. I was at 414 Hunters Lane. I don't know exactly your address, but I think it's 411 maybe, 404. So 409, yeah. It couldn't be I'm 414, you're on the other side of the street. So. I asked my mom if she had a picture of a basketball goal, and so this is a picture of a basketball goal that's right in front of my house at 414 Hunters Lane. And Jerry put up this basketball goal for us. And Evan's right, it was one of those goals that you could lower and pick back up. And we did put Evan on the goal and raise it up and watch him squeal and cry about it. But it was fun. Jerry, from what I remember, we would play all night. I mean, there's several people in here that's played at that basketball goal. He would sit there when Evan was young. He would sit there and while we're playing, if we missed, it's not like most dads that today, or like how I would be if I had a son playing basketball, overbearing around trying to do this, you're doing that the wrong way, you're doing it this way, you should do it that way. He just would sit there and watch us have fun. And to me, it was just so amazing. My dad was killed when I was a young kid, so, seeing him, how he treated us was something that I'll never forget. Now, sometimes, let's just say that ball would go rolling down the hill, because where the goal was a big old hill. And Jerry, every time, would go running down that hill, grab that basketball, bring it back up. We'd be playing again. Somebody would shoot. The ball would somehow mess up and go running down that hill. I won't let y'all know that it was Evan, the whole time with that ball rolling down that hill. But it was a good time. And again, I think it speaks to what he was in life for us, was somebody that we could always count on, somebody that we could depend upon, somebody that was truly selfless in everything that he did. I read this quote. I thought it was important for me to say to Evan today. Only those who have learned the power of sincere and selfless contribution express life's deepest joy, true fulfillment. And hearing you say that, didn't say loved you that much, didn't hug you that much, you were 100%, as fulfillment as he could possibly ask for. And he was a great man for it.
So for those of you that don't know me, I'm Brett Gravitz, so I've been best friends with Evan for, and I guess over 30 years now, which, saying that out loud, jeez. But you already made the TiVo comment earlier where I was like, this dude's really old if he's saying TiVo, so it's all good. And, we've been best friends. Obviously, I wasn't good enough at basketball the first couple of years that I knew Evan, so we went to middle school together and high school and even college. So I had to get good at basketball before Evan would really like me and become my best friend, which he did, and he's been my best friend and brother, for the last 30 years. And with that, his family has taken me in like their own, and my family, vice versa, has also taken him in as their own son. And so when Evan told me about this, we didn't get a lot of guidance. I didn't really know what to say or what to talk about, but so I decided to, okay, let me go and sit down in a quiet place and just think for a little bit of time of, the memories I have of Evan and growing up at that time and all of those things. And we've got a 2-year-old and 4-year-old, so that left me about 5 minutes at my house, if that, Katie, maybe. But thankfully, it didn't take a lot of time because I have so many great memories of that time of our life, and it was so great. And so I started thinking of all the things. And this. I just feel like I'm at home right now. Is this? I didn't even hear anything. Are those kids crying? Like.
It's a kids area back there. We just gave them some toys. It's okay.
Oh yeah, it was just a normal day in my life at this point. But yeah, so I started thinking about what comes to mind when I just think about that time and think about Mr. Black. And, he was so impactful and so influential for me in my life and Evan and his family. So I sat down and I started thinking, and the first thing that came to mind was spaghetti, right? And for those of y'all that don't know, Evan's dad had the greatest spaghetti ever in the world. I don't know how this white dude from North Georgia came up with this amazing spaghetti recipe, but it was awesome. And he would make 30 containers of it that we would take to college, and me and Evan would eat this spaghetti breakfast, lunch, dinner like nobody's business. I still think to this day, if you tried to tell Evan that someone had better spaghetti than Mr. Black, he would probably try to fight you. Evan didn't play about Mr. Black spaghetti. And then I kept thinking, what else comes to mind? And I didn't really have on the bingo card, 2 references to his wardrobe, but Miss Jeanette with the platform shoes, and then the coach's shorts. Oh man, dude, Mr. Black loved having his thighs out. I'm talking about the short shorts, it was the gray coach's shorts with the tube socks. And I'll never forget, we used to always mess with Evan and be like, dude, what's up with your dad, man, with these short shorts? And this was the 90s, right? So everything was big and baggy. And it's crazy, who knew he was was going to be ahead of his time in terms of fashion. Because if your kids looked at a picture of us, they'd probably make fun of us and be like, oh man, Mr. Black, he had a little swag. Like, he had the tube socks, the short shorts. Like, who would have thought about that? And so then the next thing that came to mind, and I promise these will get a little more serious. I'm trying not to break down up here, so I'm going to ease into it a little bit. But the next thing that came to mind was snacks. Mr. Black had the best snacks at his house of anybody I've ever met. I mean, his pantry was crazy. I'm talking about every type of potato chip you could ever want, cookies. You know, I've got cholesterol problems now. I'm not going to blame him on those. But Mr. Black's house was the house that if you were going to have a sleepover, you wanted to go over there because you knew his snacks were on point at all times. Like, I'm talking about chips, whatever you wanted. And then when that came up, I started thinking about it, and I was like, I don't know if I ever saw Mr. Black eat any of those snacks, which leads me into the next thing that I think about, and I think probably everyone in this room who spent more than 5 minutes with Mr. Black thought of, and that was, selfless. And I'm not that smart. I actually had to look up selfless in the dictionary and make sure that that's the word I was looking for, and it is. But I think it's a term you hear a lot of people talk about today about someone willing to give you the shirt off their back, right? Like, that's a common phrase. Man, Mr. Black would give you the shirt off his back. He'd give you his car. He'd give you his house, and he'd go sleep in a dumpster if it helped you. If you needed $250 and Mr. Black only had $200 in his account, Mr. Black would give you all $250 and figure out a way to pay the overcharges, right? Like, that's the type of person Mr. Black was, and I think anyone here would, every story about him is gonna echo that. And the last thing I thought about, and obviously, we were teenagers when I was with them, so this wasn't something that I really, thought about then, but just an amazing dad, right? Like, Wayne talked about this. Man, it's such an amazing dad, and I'll never, I've got 2 young boys that I love more than anything in this world, and I think about I would do anything for them, but I don't think there was ever a parent on this earth that loved their child more than Mr. Black loved Evan, right? And I wholeheartedly believe that. And I think, Wayne touched on this, and like, my dad is very similar, that era. They didn't talk a lot. They weren't very affectionate. They didn't, really tell you how they felt. They weren't posting pictures on Instagram on your birthday with like a diatribe of how much they love you and all that stuff. Like our parents didn't really do that type of thing. But when I was thinking back and just like, what could I talk about? I always remember Mr. Black always having this look on his face when he would be talking to Evan or talking about Evan. And at the time, I was a teenager. I didn't know what that look meant. But now that I have kids, I know exactly what it was. And he was so proud of Evan. Like, Evan was everything to him, right? And now that I have kids, like, I look back and I realize that and realize what that face was that he met and how much happiness Evan brought to him. And Evan talked about this before when he introduced us. And when I talk about him being a dad, it just wasn't to Evan, it was to everyone that he loved, right? Think about this. This man would literally, similar to Wayne's story, but, we're a little bit older at this point. I mean, this man would literally wake up, 6, 7 a.m., buy us breakfast, McDonald's, of course, take us to downtown Atlanta to some random gym and watch us play pickup for 7, 8 hours. And I mean, he would literally sit there, and I think Evan mentioned this in a comment on Facebook or something. Like, I don't even know if his dad really liked basketball, but he loved us, and he loved Evan, and that's all that mattered, right? So it didn't matter if Evan played tennis, if he played basketball, if he was a swimmer, played the piano. It didn't matter. Mr. Black loved it because Evan loved it, and the people he loved that he loved Evan also loved us. But he would do that for 7, 8 hours, read the paper, watch us, pick us up, take us to eat lunch, buy everyone that was with us lunch, McDonald's, of course, again, and then drive us to Marietta to another gym, and we'd stay there for 5 or 6 more hours playing basketball and sit there the whole time again, never wanting to leave. And then we'd finally get done. We'd be done playing. We'd be exhausted. He'd take us to dinner. You guessed it, McDonald's. We're not going to talk about the cholesterol issues. It's okay. But we would go to his house, and we would all spend the night. And I mean, you got to remember, Dustin and TJ are here. I don't really know if we spent more than like 4 or 5 nights without one or the other for like 5 years. Like, I mean, it was crazy. Like, we were always with each other. And so we would go back to his house and we would play video games till like 5 a.m. in the morning, and obviously eat snacks. Snacks, like I already told you, were great at his house. But we played video games till 5 a.m., and I know Evan's a pastor now, but he had some anger management problems with video games. And we all did. I mean, there was definitely a lot of controllers being thrown. This wasn't like quiet time, like playing video games. This was us screaming at each other, yelling, throwing controllers, and just really getting after it. And I'm looking at Katie. If our kids wanted us to do that, I'd be like, nah, I'm not. Yeah, you go to the first couple hours, and then I'll go. But I mean, that was Mr. Black. Like, he loved Evan and anything Evan was doing, and the people that loved Evan. And then, when we were growing up, I had 3 best friends that are here: Evan, TJ, and Dustin, who really became more than friends. Became my family, and their families became our families, right? With Miss Jeanette, Miss Teresa, Mr. and Mrs. Vines, Mr. Black, and none of us came from the traditional family background, right? Like, we all had our own issues, and especially when it came to dads, right? We all had like our own dad issues. Like, my mom had gotten divorced, and we'd moved to Woodstock. My dad lived in Stone Mountain. I got to see him every other weekend. I had a stepdad. I was a teenager. Like, it was a lot for me. But having Mr. Black there, like that positive male role model, showing me what it was like to be a great dad and to love your kids and love things, something more than you love yourself. I didn't really realize it at the time, how impactful and how influential that was for me. And that's something that, I just wanted to say thank you to Mr. Black so much for, because that will live on, that will live on through Evan, through his children, through their children, and that will live on through me and my children and anyone that was around them, and that attitude of caring for your child and really seeing what it looked like to love your child unconditionally more than anything in this world. So, my only regret is I never really got to tell Mr. Black any of this. But to Evan's point, he wouldn't have listened to me anyways. He would have just shrugged it off and said, "Man, shut up. Like, I don't want to talk about that." But also to Evan's family, you guys took me in like your own, and thank you. So that's it.
Oh, man. Okay, so a couple things. And the reason I wanted to come up is because sometimes you got to clean some stuff up. So when we won the trip to Hawaii, my dad offered for me and Wayne to go for free, and he would purchase his own flight, hotel, football tickets, all the stuff. And Wayne, he says he wasn't able to go for a variety of reasons. That's a lie. He chose not to go because he had a middle school basketball game. Middle school basketball game. Did you win? Did you even know? You don't even know if you won. Actually, Wayne would know. He knows what the score was. He knew how many points he had. But Wayne was a big part of our lives, and Wayne's whole family, his mom, sister. One day, I will become rich just off the baseball cards that we collected because we were trying to keep up with y'all. So many stories with Brett and Dustin and TJ, and I know Dustin and TJ would love to come up here and tell y'all some stories too. To Brett's point, like, my dad was a big part of their lives, but Brett, your dad is absolutely amazing too. I love your dad. Have some funny stories about your dad. And TJ's dad was, I mean, other than my dad at the time, he might have been the most impactful man because for so many reasons. He was there with us too, but he was different. My dad was fun. TJ's dad was a little different. My dad would be like, let's go to the gym at midnight so y'all can shoot and have fun. TJ's dad would be like, let's go to the gym at midnight so y'all can run and do push-ups and do drills until you throw up. TJ, am I close? And I don't know about Brett's comment about my dad having the best snacks. The way I remember it is Miss Teresa had the best snacks. But the problem was we could never have any of Miss Teresa's snacks because she ran a daycare and those weren't for us. And so her hearing is, I'm telling you, she could be 3 miles away. If we open that refrigerator, boys, we're like, how did she even know? We were, she's not even here. She's in the cul-de-sac. What? And Brett's mom was a little, she was amazingly impactful in a different way as well, because you knew that she was there and you knew that she loved you, but you also knew that Brett was the number one priority no matter what happened. So for example, Brett's mom, and again, I'm sorry, I apologize, seriously, if you have to leave, it is okay. I need to do this for me. So I know I'm rambling, I got it. I'm sorry. Kind of sorry. I'm not actually really sorry. Brett's mom and me and Brett, was that all that was there? We go rafting. Have y'all ever been rafting? When I was growing up, we'd ride by the Chattahoochee River on 75, and my dad would do this cool thing. And he'd say, let's guess how many rafts are out there, and we'd guess. Never got it right. But so when I'm thinking rafting, I'm thinking we're going like smooth, like getting oh gosh, y'all know the things you go down the river in. Well, this was not that. This was like category 5, like this is like hurricane weather rafting. And so we're going, and the guide tells us if you fall out, make sure you keep a hold of the rope on the side of the raft. And I'm like, okay, cool, I hope we don't fall out, but that'd be kind of fun. I'm like 15 at the time. And so we hit this, I don't know, wave, and it flips us like on the side. Well, one side of the raft, we all fell out. The whole side fell out. Brett and his mom were on the other side. They didn't fall out. And so I'm holding on because I'm my dad's son. I'm an athlete. I'm holding on, and we're just zooming down this river, and I feel something hit my knee, and then I see blood in the water, and I'm like, oh, this is not good. So I pull myself up, and I think I'm about to die. I'm like, Brett, I need you. Because Brett has always been bigger than me and stronger than me. So Brett is the guy who can pull me up out of this raft. And so I'm holding on. I pull myself up. Brett comes to try to get me out of the raft, but that means he has to go to the other side. There's nobody on the other side. Brett's big enough where if he goes to the other side might flip, and now everybody's in the water. And I've never seen a woman be so fast and so strong as Brett's mom when she hit him in the chest and said, your friend will die before you go over there and flip us out of this raft. That's a true story. That is a true story the way I remember it. And I pulled myself out of the raft. So we had great parents that were all a little different and special in their own way. My dad, one of the things that was so fun is he would drive us everywhere. I mean, he would drive us. Brett is not exaggerating. Wayne is not exaggerating. He would literally drive us all day, every day, whether it was to Falcons games. The only time he ever got mad at me that I remember was we went to this Falcons game, and Wayne found out how to watch Falcons games on the field and then go in the locker room with the teams after the game. Well, it's amazing. Falcons were so bad, they had no security whatsoever. Really, the whole trick was once you knew how to do it, if you just acted like you were supposed to be there, they would think you were supposed to be there. And so we did this for 2 or 3 years. And so the first time that we do this, it's amazing. There's a lot of stories. I have time. I'm not going to tell them because they don't have to do with Dad. But the second time we do it, they were playing the Detroit Lions. And we would walk in with the visiting team because the Falcons were so bad, we didn't want to go in their locker room. So we go in with the Lions, and they shut the door to the locker room once the players are in. So the first time, me and Wayne both get in, they shut the door, we're in the locker room, it's all good. The second time, they shut the door after me, before Wayne. And so now I'm in the locker room with 52 grown men, professional athletes, who are getting undressed and all, and the Falcons had just beaten them, and so they shouldn't have beaten them. So the coach is just dog cussing these guys. I mean, he is just going off, and I'm 9 years old, and I'm hiding behind this locker, and all of a sudden I realize Wayne is not in there, and I get terrified. I mean, I mean, you can't prove it, but I might have started crying. And so the Lions' best player, he sees me and he's like, hey man, like, what are you doing in here? And he lets me out of the locker room, and I go out of the locker room and I go back to where my dad is. And my dad, I think it was the only time my dad ever got mad at me that I knew about anyway, or that he got mad at me to my face. Some of y'all might be like, he got mad at you a lot, but not to my face. And he said, why did you leave the locker room? What are you doing? You're a 9-year-old kid. This is the time of your life. It's the only time he'd get mad at me is if I didn't want to watch the game on the field or we didn't want to stay longer and get autographs. But he used to do this thing when he'd drive us all around, and we'd just be driving, and if we got tired or if we started to doze off or it got a little quiet in the car, and he would just scream at the top of his lungs and slam on the brakes as hard as he could. And I mean, if you're just in the car, it is just the most shocking thing in the world. And I know I have some of Isaiah's friends here, and they know if you ride with me, the first time you ride with me, everybody knows we're going to scream, we're going to slam on the brakes, and you're going to get that Jerry Black effect. The other thing that he would do is he'd always act like he was running out of gas. And he'd be like, I'm running out of gas, I'm running out of gas, I'm running out. But then every once in a while, he'd run out of gas. And so you never really knew, especially back then, because it had y'all younger people, y'all don't know TiVo or this. It didn't say like how many miles you had left. It was just a dial. Dad was so much fun. And he was. His best attribute was he was a dad. I want to ask my brother Lance to come up and speak. We only have 7 more speakers, so I'm joking. But my dad loved being a dad. He also loved Cleveland, Georgia, and being outside and being in the mountains. And so I've asked Lance to come because he's the most outdoorsy, mountainy kind of guy that I know.
I totally forgot about the slamming on the cars. Did you? Slamming on the brakes.
Remember it though?
Oh yeah, I remember it. I think I blacked it out. So, all righty. I knew Jerry the most when I was young, maybe between ages of 14 and 4. Jerry absolutely loved kids. He was at his best with kids. I've never met an adult in my entire life that related as well, was absolutely loved by all children. He had a gift, and I'm going to tell you some stories that after about 40 years still bless me. Jerry loved the North Georgia mountains, in particular Cleveland and Helen. He would go there quite often for the weekend and for vacation. Absolutely every time we were there, Jerry had a cousin. The hippie girl in the shop that made the candles, that was a cousin. The guy that sold us the honey, that was a cousin. The glass blower, that was a cousin. I never really knew if they were all cousins, but I think they were. He loved the mountains because he was related to absolutely everyone, or because he felt like he was. Either one would be pretty good. The house on Stirrup Manor was decorated with one theme, Amazon jungle. All corners of that house were like a tropical jungle. Jerry loved his plants. Whenever my wife brings home a plant, or I come across a plant at a store and I know the name of it, Jerry gave me that knowledge. There's absolutely no reason I know the name of a wandering Jew or a spider plant or a mother-in-law's tongue. I never heard Jerry raise his voice. I'm sure he did like all people, but I never heard it. One year, the entire family, including 2 cousins, piled into a tank of a 1974 Cadillac Coupe de Ville and drove to Jekyll Island. That car, even when it was new, should never have transported 8 people 7 hours to the island. The entire trip, between kids yelling about Volkswagen Beetles, kids being car sick, he never lost his temper or raised his voice. I think he was having a great time. Before we would go on vacation or needed some spending money, Jerry would always ask us if we would like to do some work to earn some money. There were only 2 chores, cutting grass or picking up rocks. Over the years, I moved a metric ton of rocks out of his little yard. It was a small yard. No yard could possibly have that many rocks. I firmly believe he would dump the rocks back in the yard. It was all just an excuse so he could give us some spending money. Jerry was a great storyteller. He had an unlimited supply of stories. My favorites were scary stories. While on vacation at Vogel State Park, Jerry told a story about a ghost train. Supposedly, there was a train of Confederate soldiers that crashed on Blood Mountain, and at certain times of the year, you could see the train or hear those soldiers. He asked us if we'd like to go up there and go camping. We eagerly volunteered. We packed our tents and sleeping bags, went up the mountain and started a campfire. As soon as it got full dark, he retold that story. We heard a train. We tore down that mountain in the middle of the night. Jerry always wore a suit to work, so I thought he was rich. There were a few stores in Woodstock and Canton that he would take us into, and he told us we could have anything in that store we wanted. Anything. That's a pretty big deal for a 10-year-old. It wasn't until much later that I found out all these stores he did the books for, and they all owed him a bunch of money. So Jerry was an athlete, and he ran cross country for Georgia State. He was in the Army, and he could absolutely smoke you in tennis. He could out-hike you, he could outrun you, but I think his greatest show of athletics was at Grandma Black's house playing snake in the grass. If Jerry was the snake and he wanted to tag you, you were tagged. Jerry was a good man, and I'm a better man for knowing him. So.
Dad loved Cleveland, but man, I love that house on Hunter's Lane. There's so many stories, not just Wayne putting me on a goal and raising it to 10 feet so I couldn't get off, but one of my favorite was, and I was kind of hoping he would be here today. We used to, the guy who lived behind me, the kid who lived behind me was Eric Gunderson. And we used to, sometimes we'd play baseball in the backyard, and other times we'd play basketball. The dad made our house literally a 10-year-old's dream. So once mom moved out, I mean, he had plans of putting hardwood in the living room, and then when you walked in, there was like an elevated, and it had really high ceilings. He had plans of putting hardwood in the living room and a basketball goal when you first walked in. So we had a little half court in the house. Now, he genuinely wanted to do that. He didn't get around to it, which we'll leave that part out. But anyways, Eric would come over and we'd play baseball, and sometimes we'd play basketball. But when we played baseball one time, my dad was pitching and Eric was up to bat, and the house was directly behind Eric. And so my dad throws it, Eric swings, he foul tips it, so the ball keeps going backwards, and it hits a window. I mean, it hits the window square, and the window shatters. And so I'm in the field, like I'm ready for Eric to hit the ball to me. My dad's pitching, Eric's hitting. Hits the window, shatters the window. Eric's eyes got huge. I mean, they were so big. And he looks at my dad, and my eyes, I was like, oh. And I look at Dad, and Dad kind of pauses for a second. He thinks about it, and he goes, well, strike one. He's like, all right, you ready? Here we go. like that was Dad. That was Dad. To Lance's point, you couldn't bother him. You couldn't get under his skin unless your name was Jeanette. And other than that, he was always the same. My dad lived in Cleveland for a while, and then he had to move from Cleveland because his cousin, who owned the land, passed away. And my sister, Tracy, his daughter, took him in, and Lance and Doug drove up to Cleveland because either I was in Texas or I just was doing everything to not do that. They drove to Cleveland, packed Dad up. The thing we haven't talked about is Dad was a hoarder. If you don't know what a hoarder is, you can look it up, and there might be a picture of my dad's living room, kitchen, bedroom. Like, he was a hoarder. So we went and visit one time, and the kids couldn't even barely go in his house because, number one, there was only like a walkway. All the rest of it was just filled with stuff. And number two, he lived out in the country where there was chickens and dogs and and Lance and Doug, they didn't think twice. They drove all the way to Cleveland, packed up all his stuff, junk stuff, moved it into a storage, and asked, what else can I do for you? And so, man, I've always appreciated that. Yeah. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah. Okay, so before Tracy comes, my dad, and I was so mad I couldn't find a picture of the VW Bug. He had this white VW Bug, and y'all may not remember it as white because you probably remember it as yellow or brown. The yellow was from he never had a car wash and the history of the car. The brown was from the rust. But my dad drove that Bug until it literally caught on fire at the corner of Bells Ferry and 92 one day. I'm listening to my Walkman with the earphones on, and Dad taps me, and the engine was in the back. So he taps me, and he does like this, and I look in the back, and it's literally flames coming. And so we jump out of the car, wait till the flames finish off. We push it into that Waffle House parking lot and never saw the VW Bug again. Well, I think it was Lynn's car. Lynn had a Honda Accord, and my dad, I think it was Lynn. And so my mom talked my dad into buying Lynn's car for about 200% over asking price. And Dad never forgot that, and he would remind me often of that. And so I'm just joking, but that's the way Dad saw it. And so Dad had this car until he couldn't drive anymore. Well, once he started living in Cleveland, he would go buy calves, and he would sell them. He'd raise them, sell them, and then go buy some more. We didn't have a way of doing this. He didn't have a pickup truck. So what he did was he took the back seat, the entire back seat, out of the Honda Accord, and he would drive these calves. He would go pick up these calves in a Honda Accord, put them in the back seat, and drive them back home. And he did this over and over until he said one day one of the calves made their way up to the front seat, and he was like, maybe I shouldn't keep doing this. This might be a little dangerous. And so he quit. I think he just quit buying calves because he didn't buy another car. But he had to move from Cleveland, and his daughter, my sister Tracy, took him in and was absolutely, positively what he needed. And you want to talk about selfless. Dad was selfless, but might be Dad that instilled that into her. And Tracy is absolutely in line with that. And she took care of him for so many years. So if you haven't cried yet, here is the time that you're going to cry, because let's see if Tracy can talk about her dad.
Hi, I'm Tracy. Wow, where do I start? So, I'm a huge Harry Potter fan, like off the chain ridiculous. My husband Brian and I were at the Fox Theater because they had a Harry Potter marathon. So it was like 2 movies every weekend. And I think it was the last 2 movies, and we were out not smoking or anything. We had just, gone out for the break. And my phone rings, and it's Dad, and I picked it up. And he said, hey, I need somewhere, to go. I'm sick of my cousins, I think is the way he put it. I'm done with my cousins in Cleveland. I'm not sure what he was talking about, but okay. So we said, sure, Dad, come on, no problem. And the next thing I know, he's with us. Lance and Doug moved him into our home, and it was wonderful to get to know him again. I was telling Lance that I never really lost touch with Dad because even when he was in Cleveland, he would call, every couple of weeks to ask me how to make sweet tea. Because I did make the best sweet tea in the family. But how hard is it to forget the 3 ingredients and the measurement that he was touching base? So then we would go on and we would talk about different things. He wanted to know everything about teaching. He had great questions about teaching and education, and he had a whole lot of opinions that I had to be nice about, that I did not always agree with, but he had them. The thing that I think was the most important for me was that he loved me. Sometimes that's all we need, somebody to just love you. And no, he didn't hug me. He didn't leave love notes laying around. Oh, Tracy, you're so special. He just loved me. And it was important. He was with us for 2 years. And then another incredibly important young man came into our lives. Gabriel came into our life, and Brian and I didn't have kids. And then suddenly we had a 9-year-old. It was terrifying. I was, 50. I didn't know what to do with a kid. So I didn't really ask Dad's advice, but he was there paying attention, and he would talk to me about what to do and how to react, and mostly it was, you love him, that's okay. Whatever way I screwed up, however I said the wrong thing or did the wrong thing or perhaps made him feel bad, Dad said, you love him, that's all you need. Mom would say, give him a soft landing. You've given him a soft landing. And I told Gabe, well, we'll figure it out together. Me, you, and Uncle Brian. We don't know what we're doing. We'll figure it out together. And Dad said, Tracy, I didn't know what I was doing. I didn't know what I was doing when I married your mother. Not in a bad way. But I didn't know what I was doing when I married your mother and took in 4 kids. One time he said, none of you were crazy, but all of you were a challenge. I can't imagine. I mean, Kathy was the only challenge I recognized. Another person that came into our lives that was so special and important is Zamaria. She came with Gabe. I think they met about 6 months after Gabe came to us. She and Dad were like bros. They were like buds. Okay, she likes to play and Dad likes to play. And we had the most redneck pool setup in our backyard you can possibly imagine. The pictures are freaking hilarious. It is crazy. And Dad, man, we couldn't get the yard straight. I don't know how many pounds of sand, like 100 pounds of sand. We tried to get the flat, didn't work. Dad did some crazy thing with a cinder block. Why do we all have a cinder block in our yard? There's always just some random cinder block sitting around. Doug's nodding. You know what I'm saying? Where do they even come from? I never built anything. But anyway, Dad finds this random cinder block somewhere, and he props the whole thing up and makes it work. And Mari loved to splash. Gabe loved to splash Mari, and Mari loved to splash Dad. So Dad would pretend to be working in the yard so that he could walk by and get splashed. And I think there's a lot of reasons why I want to bring up these two. But maybe the most important reason is selfish. It's for me because it reminded me of how Dad was with us. He played. He was fun. He cared. So to watch him with them was amazing. And Gabe is a snack monster. He is a snack monster. But Dad could never quite figure out what Gabe wanted. So Dad would go to the store and get like a bunch of different stuff and bring it home. And Gabe was always nice, but he didn't like any of it. But Dad never stopped trying, just like he did when we were all young, when we needed something. Even if he didn't know what to do, he always tried. So the Stone Mountain years, awesome years. Everybody loved him. He got in a little bit of trouble with the well, we call him the mayor of the neighborhood, because they had these trees that they've been growing for like 30 or 40 years lined up. I can't remember what kind of trees they are. Oh, Terry, you remember what kind of trees those are? Dad would know the answer. So anyway, you're driving in the neighborhood, there's beautiful trees, slow growing trees. Crepe myrtles. Thank you, Amy, I think that's right. And Dad decided they needed pruning. So he pruned one, and Ben had a discussion with him. And there was no more pruning. There was also no more discussion between Dad and Ben. Dad, yeah. But he did take care of the pocket park. Dad did more work on everybody else's lawn than he did on ours. We had like the worst lawn in the neighborhood. But everybody else's was gorgeous. Does that not sound like Dad? Absolutely. Sounds like Dad. Dad worked on the path that they built for the Olympics. And he would mow it. He would plant things on it. Everybody knew him walking up and down the street. He made friends everywhere he went and was a role model for me. All I can do is look at the back of your program, would you? Just flip it over. Amy, can I borrow yours? Absolutely. Thank you kindly. I never have a prop when I need one. We've got our dadisms and quips and how we remember him. These were the things that I heard and things that I know. So we're running out of gas. Sometimes we were, but mostly we weren't. Sometimes we didn't know that we were actually out of gas until Dad was half a mile away with the gas can. And we're like, okay. He had animals that lived in the engine of the car that would force him to go to the local store, Jack Meeks, and he would buy everybody snacks. And Doug loved that one. That was his. He loved that one. Kathy mentioned that Dad, when we were really mad, mostly when she was teenage stomping mad, it was mostly her, Dad would say, don't laugh. Whatever you do, don't laugh. Nope, don't you laugh. And we all did. I mean, it is such a corny, random thing, but we always laughed. Mariah said he was the master tickle monster, and he was when we were little too. That was his thing. He was at every game early. Lance and Doug like to call it sports ball, just because it's sort of whatever, all the sports, and he was at every game. Kathy's in the basement making bad decisions, and Dad is listening through the vent upstairs planning his tricky interventions. It wasn't just the cigarettes, it was lots of things. He also put loads in her cigarettes so they would explode so he could laugh upstairs. Sorry, Kat, wow, does it feel like Pile on Kathy Day or what? Best snake in the grass, already mentioned that. Oh, this one makes me crazy. Can't sleep during the long ride to Vogel or Jekyll? Here, let me put on one of my tax policy update tapes. That was some boring stuff, man. In Stone Mountain, his pretty much go-to meal was frozen waffles, sausage, and hot sauce. Hey, Gabe, what did we call when Dad made sausage? Do you remember? Yes, you do. We would walk in and go, Sausage Day. Do you remember Sausage Day? Yep. I gotta get home at Sausage Day. I gotta make sure he gets the house. It was crazy. I mean, because he would do like 2 or 3 pounds at a time, so he didn't have to do it a lot. So it was Sausage Day. And then the last 2 things were 3-piece suits and cows. And I put that on the bottom on purpose because to me it really sums up the two of his personas. I should have put father, but I guess we kind of got that covered. Think we got that covered, Evan? I think so too. I'm blessed to have had these years with this incredible man. I understand more about love, and if it hadn't been for him and the consistency and calmness of my husband, I don't know where Gabe and I would be. We might be a little more messed up than we are. Mari, we love you. Robinsons, we love you. In the back. Evan, please come get this because there's like 5 things that are going to make me cry.
Dad obviously loved Tracy. um, he loved the fact that he got to pay for Tracy's first wedding. And and this was amazing. He would always say, like, yeah, Tracy asked me to pay for her wedding, and your mom didn't think I had the money. He didn't have the money. But what he did have was 17 businesses who hadn't paid him in 4 years because they'd be like, oh, and yeah, don't worry about it. He didn't care about money. Even though he was an accountant, we never really figured that one out. And he was so proud of that, and he loved you so much. Gabe, he loved you. He talked about you a lot to me, and he cared deeply for you. He was very concerned because you didn't play sports. He didn't know what to do with you for that. And Mari, it was so great the few times I got to see you and him together because you're more playful than Gabe, and that just he knew how to do that. And I know that he loved you as well. Dad also loved my family. He loved Priscilla from the first time that I told him anything about her. I don't know if he had a crush on you, like if he just thought you were that, but he loved. I mean, from the first time he loved her. Like he hadn't even met her. I'm like, Dad, might not last. Like, I don't even know if she likes me. And Dad's like in love with her. Like he loves her. And he always loved her. He was always concerned with her. And he was always concerned for our kids. I'm going to try to talk about it when she's done. But many times Dad would ask me to leave. When I was talking to him or visiting, he'd say, all right, it's time for you to go. And I'd say, Dad, why? I mean, I got to go. And he was like, well, you need to go check on your mom. He thought Mom was old and feeble and broke. And I didn't have the heart to tell him, Dad, Mom's in Paris. Like, Mom's living a better life than all of us. Mom is fine. We need to call Mom and see if she can loan us some money. Mom is still helping us. But you know what I mean. And the other thing that he would say is you gotta leave here. When I would visit him, you gotta get home because you can't be away from your kids. And I would show him pictures and videos of Mariah dancing or Isaiah playing basketball or Josiah playing football, and he would just light up. And he loved them. He loved Priscilla. Really quick, and this is random, but this is kind of for me too. Cody and Emmeline, he loved y'all. Oh man, he loved y'all. Cody, I think he would have stolen you if he could have. And Emmeline too. Emmeline, you probably know this, but Dad just didn't do as well with girls. He just didn't. If you didn't play sports or drive motorcycles or dirt bikes, or like he did his best, but he loved you. Oh man, he loved y'all.
He was always watching.
Always. And he loved you. He loved you from the moment he heard about you till he took his last breath.
I wasn't gonna say anything. I didn't realize. I think we've been holding our breath for a little over a year for me. With Jerry transitioning, I didn't realize it would hit me this hard. And he's the first of our parents to go. But I shared this with our church family, and some of them are here. We appreciate them for being here and helping out. Evan and I met when I was 17. He was 19 in ORU. And I am, you know, one year before that, my parents had split and my mom moved 3 kids across the country to the Midwest. So we're now in Oklahoma, and I'm working 2 jobs in high school, and my mom at one point was also working 2 jobs, and we're just trying to put the pieces together. So a year after that is when I met Evan. So I had my own trauma and junk and all of that. And this one lady had given me this like free car. It was like a stick shift with no windows and cut off in the middle of intersections. So it didn't last long. But then I finally got something else that I was trying to drive to try to get my way to work. Because I'm like, I'm in college. I don't know if I can afford the second semester. I'm truly here on faith. And I'm just trying to make it. Well, that car ends up breaking down, I think. I know I've had my share of accidents. I can't remember if I crashed this one or what. But it either broke down or something. And I'm terrified because I'm like, I won't be able to eat. I'm like, there's no one to save me. And Evan finds out, and we were so toxic back then. Oh my God, we broke up on and off, whatever. I think we happened to be on during this time. Yeah. And so he finds out that my car, and now I'm 18, 19, he finds out that my car is down. He was like, well, let me ask my dad. I'm like, wait a minute. We're just dating, not even truly like committed or whatever. And you think your dad's gonna help a random person? In my whole life, there wasn't anyone I could think of that would have it to even do it. But the fact that he even had enough confidence in his father to help a random person was my first experience of a human like that. So he calls his dad and he's like, Dad, Priscilla, she got to get to work, this and that and another. And Jerry and Jeanette go half and half to buy me a $5,000 Toyota Camry. The generosity blew my mind. I couldn't believe it. I had never seen it. Jerry lives on in you. Because you didn't want to see me struggle. And you went to who you know who also would care about a stranger. Our first year of marriage, this time I didn't cause the accident, but I was pulling into an intersection and all of a sudden somebody hit me from behind. And so I get out the car and it's an older gentleman. He immediately starts taking responsibility. But I am freaking out because, again, I am a traumatized young lady, right? Something bad happened. The world is falling apart. So I am panicked in the street. I am terrified to call him. This is 2006. I'm terrified. I'm like, oh, my God, I have to tell him the car is damaged. So I call him, and I'm freaking out. I'm like, you're not going to believe this. I was hit, this, that, and another. And he's like, calm down, calm down, calm down, calm down. And then he says, are you okay? I'm like, yes, but the car, on and on. And he's like, are you okay? And I'm like, yes. He's like, it's just a car. Who are you? That doesn't happen, right? That type of grace. And that's something I keep hearing and everyone sharing. He had such a grace for people. You were forgiven. I'm not holding it against you. You can make mistakes around me. You can be safe with me. And I love you even when you do make the mistakes, and he could see beyond the things. And so with that, I think it's one of the reasons why he was my first experience with that type of person. And it wasn't even fueled by Jesus Christ. He was just amazing, okay? And with that being said, I see that in you. And no, it's about Jerry. But if I ask for a show of hands, I think this room would say that Jerry lives on through you by the person you are and the way you would give your shirt off your back and the way you drive these kids all over the place and the way you're opening gyms for kids today. If they need anything, you're going to make sure we're going to take care, right, of community and people. And so I just wanted to make sure you knew that his memory is still alive and it's living in you.
No. So I think I understand Dad because I love doing the things Dad did. We had one of Isaiah's friends, best friends here, Braden. The other day we were somewhere and we were at the gym and Braden called his mom to come pick him up. And it was the first time I ever got mad at Braden. I've coached Braden multiple years in basketball and I love Braden, but when he called his mom and wouldn't let me take him home, I'm like, Braden, are you mad at me? Like what? But in Dad's last years, he had started to lose his memory and he lost it pretty quickly. He would never come live with us, even though he always had an open door. And so when he moved out of Tracy's house, he moved into a retirement community. And it was amazing. It was really nice, but it was way too nice for Dad. Dad did not like it. It was too nice. It was too big. And I was like, Dad, this is the smallest room they got. I don't care. It's too big. It's too nice. And so he didn't like that. He didn't stay there very long, and he wouldn't come in, live with us. And so he moved into a one-bedroom apartment, and that's a loose term. It was just 4 walls. And he would walk a mile to the grocery store and get his groceries and walk a mile home, and he was losing his memory, but he was taking care of himself. Now, he spent all his money every month, and the reason that he spent his money is because in between his apartment and the grocery store, there was a gas station, and at the gas station, there was always a homeless guy there, and I don't know if he was homeless, but he said he was homeless. And so Dad would give him $100, and then he'd go back the next day. The guy would be there, and Dad forgot that yesterday he gave him $100, and so Dad would give him another $100. And finally I had to say, Dad, if you keep going to the grocery store, I'm going to have to give you money. I don't mind giving you money. I just know you hate that. And so I think he went a different way or something. But every month he would spend all his money giving it away because he was generous, but also because he would forget that he gave it to the guy before that. And so he was losing his memory. And then he got to a place. I'd go pick him up every Wednesday and go pick him up in the morning and take him to see his girlfriend. When he was at the community, he got a girlfriend. And it's the weirdest thing ever. Because she was 90 and he was 80. Pick him up on Wednesday morning, take him there, drop him off, pick him up Wednesday night, bring him home. And we didn't talk much on the way home. Sometimes I'd drop him off in one set of clothes and he'd come home in another set of clothes, and we didn't talk at all on that ride home. I'm pretty sure she was just helping with his laundry, but but he would go and then one Wednesday he missed, and then the second Wednesday he missed. I got into his apartment and he couldn't stand anymore. He had fallen and couldn't, and I don't know how long he'd been there. I'd talk to him every day, 42 times a day. He'd call 42 times and tell the same stories every time. And when he couldn't get up, I took him to the hospital, and we did that twice, and then moved him into a rehab facility. And in the rehab facility, he got better, and it was great for him. And then when he had to move out of the rehab facility is when he went to a personal home care because he wouldn't wouldn't come live with us, and he was this close to just not asking him anymore and just bringing him to our house. And it was at the personal home care that he passed away. And every time I would go to see him at the personal home care, I would ask him, Dad, how's it going? Are you okay? How's this place? And he was just a room, but it's all he needed. It's all he wanted. And he would always say he was okay. And he would always say he was good. And then he would always kick me out to either go take care of Mom or the kids or Priscilla. And last time I saw him, I wanted to just take him out and drive around just so he could get out and be outside. And he tried to get up. And whenever he was laying down and he would sit up, he would get dizzy. And it would get really bad where he couldn't, and he'd be in pain even from the dizziness. And so we tried for 15 minutes to try to get him to sit up and come take a ride with me, and he just couldn't do it. And it wore him out, and he got tired, and he said, yeah, I'll do it next time. So we talked for a little bit longer. He kicked me out. And I always said, even though he didn't say it, I said, love you, Dad. And he said, love you too. And the next time that I saw him, he was already gone. And it's hard because I don't want my dad to have died by himself. But at the same time, Dad would have never died if I was there. He would have never, he would have never done it. And the time I'm sitting with him, he's telling one of the 5 stories, one of the stories he'd always tell, Terry's, about how he loved you and he loved playing with you and holding you. And I think all of the love for kids probably started with you. And tell a story about how your mom would chase him with a brush around the house, and he just thought it was amazing that he could get away from her, and she couldn't catch him. And so when I got the call that my dad had passed, it was shocking, even though he was 81 and in a personal home care and had some struggles. It hit me different. And it was much harder than I thought it would be. And I'm so thankful for you all being here to celebrate his life. And I hope we've told his story well, but we have one more thing that we want to do because I don't know that Dad would have necessarily wanted this before he took his last breath, but I know that this is what he would want if he could come back and speak to us now. So I'm going to ask Christina if she would come. This is Christina Harvey, a family friend, and she's going to minister to us for just a moment, and then I'm going to come back, and then you're going to get to leave. And when you leave, please do not tell me the score of the Falcons game, because I'm going to go back and watch it, and I don't want you to ruin it for me. And so my TiVo. But if you all would if you would like to stand, you don't have to stand. Maybe you close your eyes, but if you could just I'm just going to let you yeah.
Amazing grace, how sweet the sound that saved a wretch like me. I once was lost, but now I'm found. Was blind, but now I see. 'Twas grace that brought me safe thus far, and grace shall lead me home. Amazing grace, how sweet the sound that saved a wretch like me. I once was lost, but now I'm found. Was blind, but now I see.
Dad came to visit us in Austin when I was pastoring, and I didn't know Dad to go to church. It's so Dad that if you're late again, I'm not going, and if you were late, he would not go again. We were driving home from that service, and I said, Dad, what'd you think about church? And I was so interested to see what he would say, and my dad thought about it for a minute, and he said, I think people go to that church for the music. Christina might have been singing that Sunday for us in Austin. And it was hard to have conversations with Dad about Jesus and God, and because my dad was my hero. And he was everything. He was the smartest, most amazing man I'd ever met. And so it was difficult. And when he was living in Cleveland, there was I don't know if it was a pastor or somebody from the church, and they would go every week and they would just be with him, and I don't know what they did, but Dad would tell me about this guy, and I would ask, and he wasn't a cousin. So I was like, who is this guy? And he finally told me he was from the church, and I was like, oh, and it was great because that opened a door for me to be able to have the conversations with him that were difficult to have. And so I asked Dad, well, what do y'all talk about? He's like, oh, well, he talks about the Bible and all this stuff, and he helps me with the cows. I was like, man, I love this guy. And so finally I was like, well, Dad, why didn't you ever go to church growing up? And he didn't really talk about, or with me when I was growing up, he didn't really talk about it. And I was like, well, Dad, what do you think about Jesus? And my dad said, well, I don't really understand the Bible. Now this blew me away because it was nothing my dad didn't understand. And even at pastoring at the time for 7, 8, 9, 10 years, I was like, the smartest man I know. What do you mean? Like, God created the earth. We messed it up. His son came and saved us. Like, you believe in him, you spend eternity. Like, what? This is simple. And I was so nervous. And I said, well, Dad, what do you believe about Jesus? And he said, well, I believe that Jesus is God and Jesus is my Savior. And it was the best conversation I've ever had with my dad. It was better than the Falcons games. It was better than the rides to play basketball. It was better than him buying all of y'all that came a trip to Tulsa for my senior night. It was better than anything that he ever did. And he didn't live his life waking up and praying and reading his Bible, but he lived out the principles of the scriptures more than any man I've ever met in my life. And I don't know what your theology is, but I believe that if the thief on the cross can make it to heaven in that moment of conversation with Jesus, then my dad didn't have to go to 472 church services to make it to heaven. But my dad also didn't go to heaven because he was the best dad I ever knew. And my dad also didn't go to heaven because he was the most selfless man I ever knew. He didn't go to heaven because he was a great athlete, and he didn't go to heaven because he was generous. This wouldn't be like my dad, but I am confident that if my dad, having been through what he's been through, could stand here in this moment with us, there would be one thing and one thing only he would want you to know. And that is that Jesus is real and heaven is real. And that if we give our lives to him, then man, we'll see my dad, maybe your parents, your loved ones, we'll see them again, that we'll live in eternity. Because as we've been bragging on my dad about how great a father he was, God is the ultimate father. God is able to do what my dad wasn't able to do. My dad could make things fun, but my dad can't save us. My dad could show us the way, but he couldn't get us to heaven. And the only thing that's kept me over the last 2 weeks is having to actually trust and believe what I say I believe and what I preach on a weekly basis. And so, if you've never given your life to Jesus, if you've never experienced that, me and Mom were talking, and man, if Dad would have lived this life of following Jesus, he could have avoided so much of the heartache and pain that he went through. And at the same time, I'm just so thankful that now he's in the place that the Bible tells us there is no more pain, there is no more loss of memory, there is no more suffering, there is no more wondering, there is no more anxiety, there are no more bills, there are no more mother-in-laws or ex-wives or rebellious teenagers. That he is in a place that we can only imagine. And so I'm not going to ask anybody to come up or anything like that, but I want to just finish with a prayer. And I hope that this prayer applies to any of you who aren't following Jesus. And I want to say thank you to all of you for being here. Lord, I pray that as we've honored my dad, as we've celebrated his life and all the ways that you used him that he didn't even know, God, I pray that each of us here would leave knowing who you are, giving the rest of our lives to you and following after you. God, we thank you that you will make us better fathers, better mothers, better wives, better husbands, better humans. But God, more importantly, I pray that we leave this place with a commitment to be selfless with the rest of our lives, to love you and to love our neighbor as ourself, to give even sacrificially, to be patient, to be loving, to be kind, but most importantly, to be followers and sons and daughters of you. And so, God, if there's anybody in here, I just pray that right now they would confess with their mouth that you are Lord. They would give their lives to you and they would turn their heart to you. And I thank you that you tell us we don't have to be perfect, and we can't be perfect, that we don't have to clean ourselves up and come to you, because we cannot do that. But if we'll come to you, you will clean us up, and you will love us, and you will save us. God, I thank you for my dad. I thank you for 45 wonderful years of seeing your love personified. In Jesus' name, amen. Again, thank you guys so much for coming. My dad would have hated this. I mean, he would have absolutely hated this. And I am kind of sorry that it was so long. But I'm also very thankful that you guys love us and my dad enough to let me and my family be able to grieve in this way. I hope that you laughed, hope that you cried, hope that you were inspired, I hope that you remembered my dad. And I want to say thank you to Uncle Homer and Aunt Cheryl. We love you. I don't want to say I regret, but I wish I would have been able to be around you all more the last 35 years. Because you are absolutely amazing. And I mean, I told you this last weekend, but man, Dad loved you. He loved both of y'all. He looked up to you. And I am so grateful that the times when I couldn't be there, or, you know, in between the 42 phone calls, that you took the other 37 phone calls and you loved him well as a big brother. And thank you so much. We love y'all. Thank you to everybody. We love you. God bless you. Pray that the Falcons won today, but do not tell me. Hey, and also, last thing, it's so great to see all of you finally come to Propel. You've all been invited for the last 3 years, and you finally showed up. Thank you. I thought it was going to be 3 years ago at our first service when we invited all of you, but here you are. So we'll meet Sunday at 10:30 right here. You know where it is. God bless you guys. We love you. Thank you.